And now it looks like we are there.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Buongiorno.
We have just started. Buongiorno, simpatico.
Russian, Italian, buongiorno.
Yeah, people. Yeah, yeah. So, dobry wieczór, or how you say that in Czech?
Yeah, exactly
Dobrý
like that.
Dobry wieczór. Okay, so
Dobry wieczór.
yeah. All right. So, welcome to our next. I believe that's our fourth podcast episode of simplifying organizations and going from madness to simplicity and from chaos to self-organization. So these podcasts are here to present and make you guys familiar with our speakers who will be presenting at our LeSS Day Europe conference happening 15, 16, 17 June online. The link to the conference will be below this video. So today we have not just one guest speaker, but two. We have Karel.
Hi guys.
And we have Martin.
Hi guys.
Hi, Martin.
And I pass you guys the microphones so you present yourselves and you explain who you are and how you are connected to LeSS. We also have Evgeny here.
Yeah.
Who is my partner at the Scrum Ukraine company and also has very good experience with large-scale Scrum adoption. So me and Evgeny, we will be asking questions from Karel and Martin because they are doing something very interesting at a Czech insurance. So Karel and Martin, the stage is yours.
Okay, I hate introducing myself.
Please
When people ask me what do, I usually respond depending who they are. If they ask me in a taxi cab, I say I'm a consultant. What do you do? IT. When I'm in the IT community, I say I'm an agile coach, but I'm not really an agile coach because I don't know what it means. On LinkedIn, I'm an agile practitioner and a professional Scrum trainer. And for the past 10 years, when I came to agile the first time, I'm actually helping companies and teams with adopting Scrum, and in the past years, the Scrum in a multi-team environment, which usually boils down to LeSS. And I come from the programming environment. I was a programmer, I still am. I still try to code, but not as often as ever. So this was one of the books that brought me to Agile, actually. Yeah, that's the XC programming, second edition, yeah, but still.
Second edition.
Well, actually, he simplified quite a bit of stuff in XP back then between these editions. So XP also went through the cycle of simplification. Okay, Martin, what's your connection to LeSS and insurance?
Well, my journey is a bit more interesting in a way that I come from marketing, actually, and that I stumbled upon Scrum by accident about 4 or 5 years ago. When we were looking for ways how to simplify the interactions between our development team and creative team. And I've continued the journey for some time, and about a year and something ago, I've actually joined NN. Well, I was looking for ways where to share the knowledge I already had and where to learn more. And I was lucky enough to stumble upon NN and Karel, actually, and other guys from NN. And this is actually the first time where I got to know some scaled frameworks, mainly LeSS.
So well, LeSS is not a particularly scaled framework, right? As we all know it. But
yeah, sure.
I'm sure we're going to come to this in a minute. So we are really interesting, guys, to learn about the journey that you had at NN, the insurance. And then we would like to dive in a specific topic, which is a team responsibility in LeSS and how you make sure managers don't actually mess around with people and let them self-organize. So maybe you can start explaining the context of this LeSS adoption or whatever you call it that you are a part of. What's the journey? How did you start? How do you call it? Do you actually call it a LeSS adoption? Do actually people know it's a LeSS adoption, the ones who are working there, or it's run undercover? how many people, how much time, what's the scope? Just give us a bit of a context of that story.
So I will start. I came to this company a bit sooner than Martin. I'm a freelance consultant, but nowadays I work for the third year already with NN. It will be 3 years, like in a week or so. Yes, I started with the IT Hub, which is an IT organization which delivers IT services for the whole NN group worldwide. And since the January 2018, I joined the business unit in Czech Republic, the NNCZ, which is not the biggest insurance on this market, but it was actually the first foreign insurance on the Czech market after the revolution. So they have a pretty big legacy here already. And they are in the market of the life insurance and the pensions, so not the full product line. And when I was asked for help, it wasn't really for any LeSS adoption or scale transformation. No one was using these words. It was for a particular project, which happened to be the most important project at the time for the company. And they were building a tool that the brokers and the agents would use for a distribution or signing a contract digitally for an insurance policy. So back then, their agents and brokers were using paper, and then was one of the last insurances on the market. He was based on paper, so they were basically playing a catch-up. And the first project, it runs since mid-2017, so I only heard stories about it. But at some point, there was a Scrum team which was working in a Salesforce and developing as an IT team. But it was just a Scrum in the name, because they were crunching tickets from the Jira. They call them user stories. They were 7 pages long each, and carefully prepared by business analysts and solution architects and everything.
That's a typical Scrum, right?
Yeah.
Scrum you see everywhere. So it's yeah.
So it didn't work. It didn't work, and this is where the management came with an idea. Maybe if we throw in a few business people to this group as well, that have actual connection to the actual brokers and provide a bit more business context, it might work a bit better. And at that time, the CFO, Morik Skalekens, who came from Romania and joined the NNCZ, he had some experience with agile squads over there, and he wanted to replicate this experience in NNCZ. So when we had a first interview within a few days, talking about the expectations and everything, he said two things that really resonated with me. He didn't care about Scrum and frameworks and productivity and everything. He said, I want these people to be 100% dedicated to this project and doing nothing else, and have 100% ownership over its success and do nothing else. And it was his two key requirements or expectation. And the theory was, if we put this, if we give this group of people the best support, they will deliver the tool on time and good enough. So they threw in a few business people from all around the company. It was like, so classic hierarchical company, just the size of the whole company is like 450 people at the headquarters, including the call centers and everything. So not really huge. And on the IT, a couple dozen people. At the time, now it's a bit more, I guess, because they acquired another insurance company in the meantime.
Yeah.
So basically, it all started, Karel, with the idea to have to give more focus to people.
Yes,
right?
yes, more focus and more responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah, the question is like, is there any specific topic related to the insurance company? Maybe like some complexity in the back end, or some, like, I don't know, old systems this people work with. So, or it's just like, was the pure team without any legacy before?
Well, yes and no. This was built on top of Salesforce, which is pretty modern. It runs in cloud. It has pretty modern technologies on top of it. Mm-hmm. And the IT part of the team was pretty skilled. Mm-hmm. With some externals in the implementation. Uh-huh. So yes, it would connect so many legacy systems, but actually it wasn't the biggest obstacle. Mm-hmm. adoption. Yeah, like if it were a team working on a legacy system. So we didn't see problems here. Yeah.
And I guess, like, guys, speaking of the focus thing, right? To dig that a little bit, like if you look at the agile fluency model, right? The way some people describe like good agile adoption happen, actually focus will be the first step there. So before you start optimizing value, before you start optimizing delivery cycles and whatnot, make sure people have focus and can be really dedicated on the domain, on the problem. Without that, probably everything else will be just lipstick on the pig. So focus, I hear that often, and my guess, if people don't do anything but just give more focus to the people, that's already like maybe 200-300% improvement to what they had before. So maybe you don't need to actually do anything else if you don't really want to, but just giving people focus, having dedicated teams, it's already a very big step forward. Although like everybody in the management knows about focus, everybody knows how evil multitasking is and whatnot, right? This rarely we see people being dedicated and having a focus on one specific product goal or one specific product. This is really surprising.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so
completely right.
Yeah. So what happened next?
So when we put all these people together at the peak combined, it was over 20, around 25 people and such. And the original idea was that the business people would in their sprint create user stories to a backlog for the IT people, which we completely skipped. We created one single backlog for the whole group, and for the few maybe months they were working like two teams, the business team and the IT team, because there was a very strong resistance of combining. Some of the people who were invited to this team weren't really invited, but somehow assigned. Some were assigned because they were good, some were assigned for other reasons. And not everybody took it like a promotion or good opportunities. Some took it really badly because it wasn't communicated at the moment in the best way possible. However, what we focused on the most is that you guys, all of you, share the responsibility for the whole result, for the whole goal. The goal was to deliver a top-notch digital distribution tool for the broker network so that we can actually compete again on the market. And besides the whole IT team, which was like 12, maybe 13 people, there were joining people from around, which was the broker managers from Slovakia and Czech Republic, which was the business analyst and the solution architect and other people and the user experience expert and everything. So the first thing we did when we talk about the team responsibility, and in Scrum and in LeSS, the whole team, the whole product group share the responsibility for the result. What do they share responsibility for? What is the product? So we did a product definition, which is one of the first step in any Scrum adoption. What is actually the product that we are delivering? And if you put it in a few sentences, it's pretty clear, and the devil is in the details. This is where we come with the legacy systems. So if the product is this tool, and the tool connects via some integration platform towards the product management system and towards the primary system, are they part of the product too as well?
Yeah. So I'm really happy, Karel, that you bring up this topic of a product definition. Yeah, because it is always a phrase, a thing that pops up when people speak about LeSS adoption, but not so many people can actually explain how to arrive to a good product definition, right? If you get the LeSS book or the LeSS guides, there's basically one pager, right? Which says, firstly, you need to define your product as broad as possible from the user, from the customer perspective, from the business perspective. And this would be your product, right? So for LinkedIn, the whole social network is the product, right? And for Microsoft, I guess the entire Office suite is the product plus all the cloud stuff and all that. That would be a product. And then because you have some legacy, you have some boundaries, you have some cross company, I don't know, frontiers, then you need to make it smaller and narrower to make sure that people actually can live these smaller product definition, and then over time you would want to actually expand it, and that's a journey for many years. So that's the theory, right? We'll know from Les. How did you arrive with your product definition? What was that actually, and has it changed over time, over these 3 years of the journey?
Thank you for this question.
Yeah.
I usually look at this from two sides, from the outside and from the inside. And I run a workshop for the product definition, which usually takes a day to come up with some very crude draft of the definition. And the first morning, the first half is spent, how does the product look like from the perspective of the customer? Who's the customer? Who's the user? And suddenly there is multiple stakeholders around with a different relationship to the product. So you start exploring this question: who is using the product? Who has a stake in the product? Who pays for the product? What is the value of it?
Right. And for the insurances, and we also have these questions and discussions a lot, Evgeny, with banks, right?
What is the product?
What is the product of companies which offer service, not really a digital product? Yeah. So I'm not using insurances as software product. I'm just buying the insurance, right? If I can, if as a customer I can buy insurance without actually using any software, I'll be even happier. So what is actually a product of a service-oriented company? That's a very interesting question here. So what did you guys end up with in the end?
Yeah. We didn't go that wide because the actual product was already developed. Right. Over the years, I worked with, and then I had some idea how this kind of product is being developed, but it's a lot of math, then some compliance and legal and more math, and then the product is done. And there is not too many opportunities to iterate on the market. So the product was done, it was being sold, but what we were developing is the tool for the distribution. So our product was the tool, which was built up on the Salesforce. So is the Salesforce platform part of the product or not? And if it were, what would be the consequences? If it were not, what would be the consequences? But this is actually the second look. Yeah, this is the look from the inside. What kind of parts of software components and artifacts and activities are there? But the first look is from the outside. So who is using this? What value does it bring to whom? And which of these is more important and less important? So in the first part of the product definition, we look from the outside, while the product was a big black box. And maybe an interesting tidbit was, who is the customer? And at the time, the company saw their customer, not the actual client buying the policy, but the broker, because this is the one with whom they have a certain economic relationship and who are actually contributing to the success of the sales or not. And at that time, it seemed to make sense. And really what the whole team and everyone was focusing on was to make the brokers happy, to make sure the tool is better than the competition, and to do a lot of focus groups and comparison and everything. But the whole company, since that time, was focusing more on the client as the actual client. We might talk about it later because it's 1 year in the future from what we are discussing right now. At the moment, the customer was the broker, and things were from his perspective. And then the second part is what is inside of the product. What are the guts? If you open the black box, what we can see, and what part is the team responsible for and which not. And this is usually pretty arbitrary list. Some parts are pretty clear. Of course, Salesforce platform is part of the product, because if it weren't, it would suck. Who would do it anyway? But then there was question, the training materials for the brokers, the training materials for the call center. Who does produce this? Is it the team or is it someone else? In our case, it was the team. They were preparing the training materials, or at least the materials for the materials. The actual launching, to bringing it to the actual brokers. Yeah, usually Scrum teams develop something, put it somewhere, and then someone picks it up and put it into production and do everything. No, this team was actually responsible also for launching, for negotiating with the separate broker companies, to prioritizing with what broker companies they would roll it out first, which is more important, and so on. So the actual launch was also the part of the product definition. And then they were like the integration platform. Would it make sense to put it into the product and therefore into the responsibility of the team or not?
Okay. It sounds, guys, that you've started already with quite a broad and good definition in terms of like there were no like undone work which is handed over to some other people, like all the documentation, you said training materials, launching, all the stuff was already. So do you think you got lucky with that part, or it's like it's normal in your world? And how maybe this whole thing would have evolved if those parts were not actually part of your definition? Do you think eventually people would expand the definition to include those things?
I wouldn't call it lucky. It was hard.
Okay. Hard work.
Where we got lucky was actually the first interview with the CFO. Now he's a CEO. He was switching the roles at the very beginning with his focus on the focus. Yeah, that was the crucial part, and his requirement of people being 100% dedicated on this and having no other activities at all, like zero, no exceptions. This was behind the scene. The rest of it was really just work. But yeah, we were definitely trying to challenge the notion of the product definition. But again, the product definition itself was the outcome of the workshop of the actual people. Yeah, we invited many of the team members and some other stakeholders to come up with the product definition.
Okay, so let's move.
And since then we got much broader. Yeah.
Okay. So let's move Martin into this discussion. So Martin, at which stage did you join that, and what was your role, and what's your role now, and what was some of the key developments that you've observed along this journey, if you may?
Sure. I actually joined in a pretty interesting period or situation, as Karel mentioned, and then acquired another insurance company. Which was kind of happening at the time I joined. And funnily enough, I think it was even weeks, it was not that long after I joined, a strategic decision was made that the whole solution that Karel just described, the team developed, which was the digital selling tool, will actually be decommissioned because of the technology that was acquired with the other company. So that was pretty interesting situation because the whole product definition that was created and the whole product that the team was developing suddenly was on the decommission path, and the team needed to kind of reposition itself and again discover again actually what their product is going to be moving forward, and what the setup of the team will be moving forward. And I think that it was pretty intensive situation for the team, and we had a lot of work to do. And still, in a way, this situation kind of continues. And for example, even now, with the whole transformation that is occurring still, given the acquisition. Even now, we are now in the new product definition for the team. Even now, we are now trying to find out and define what the actual product of this original team is or will be in the future.
Okay, so during this M&A situation that you guys been through, did you have to include the developers and people from the acquired company into your basically product group that you were part of, or? how did the merge affected your product group and your product definition? That's my question.
I think that we did not need to include them. Obviously, there were lots of discussions and interactions, but the original product group stayed the same.
Okay.
And kind of reposition or switch the focus from the digital selling tool itself to CRM and other software tools, mainly for the internal distribution network for the tied agents.
Okay. So
the Salesforce is staying.
Yeah.
Yes.
The tool built on top of it would at some point in time be decommissioned.
Yes.
Did you guys have to reshuffle teams, create new teams, restructure something, or it was the same teams that were building the initial product, just basically slowly adapted towards the new technology and the new product? What was the process there?
Actually, what Martin described happened in the future, like 1 year and few months after this team actually started to exist.
Okay.
So the team started to exist in February, something like that, and it took until April or May when they come up themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We might actually mix up the business people with the IT people and create a really cross-functional team. It might help. So this was the first point when the team reshuffled, and but we knew that with the other coach, Ricky, who is not on this call and helped me to start it, that it should happen sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the team needed to come up themselves with the idea.
So who come up with this idea with merging the teams?
Actually, the most grumpiest of the developers. Because they said these stand-ups with 13 people, they suck. Because it's 13 of us, and then we meet anyway 5 of them, and it sucks. So let's do it different. And ever since, we made sure this is their responsibility to make sure that they reshuffle the teams as they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
So we followed the classical approach, create the constraints, what kind of skills that should be presented each team. There is a case study on the LeSS works, and if you follow the checklist, you basically go there. So there was no major hiccup. There were 4 teams. We didn't know the number. It was up to them, but each of them was somehow cross-functional. And then there was some fluctuation. Some people left, some people came. So it was up to the team to come up where the newcomers will join. And there was several episodes during the past 2 years, 2.5 or almost, when they came up, we now should reshuffle because these teams seems to be too weak in this competence, and these too strong. Maybe let's do it differently. And it never had anything to do with the acquisition because they were basically 2 ITs. Yeah, actually 3 ITs because this product group building on top of Salesforce as the only company kinda created a third organization.
So let me please go ahead.
From the early beginning, did you have a team that actually was cross-functional, like a feature team, or it was like more components teams? Like
there were no components.
No, it's just like okay.
They built it from the ground up.
From the ground up. Okay.
They built it from the ground up. There were several components in the workflow.
They built it
maybe
by
some
themselves.
developers were focusing more on it, but there were definitely no components. But with this number, it wasn't even possible.
Yeah, but there is a question in the chat regarding this, right? So the question is like, how did we manage to move from component to feature teams? As far as I understood, there was no component teams from the early beginning. There was the feature team by design.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But the first team
luck again. Pure luck.
You are very lucky guys. You defined the product as wider as it might be. You had a feature team from the beginning.
Well, that the CFO behind the whole thing.
CFO has been engaged.
So I think any coach would have succeeded there, right?
Yes. We just came there. It was lying on the floor just to pick
It
it
was
up.
just lying on the floor. Let me clarify one more thing. So we are slightly arriving to the main topic of our podcast today, which is team responsibility in LeSS. So let me clarify something about the team structure. So you guys mentioned that at some point the business people, right, became part of the team. And I really would like to understand what that actually means. Does it mean that these people actually became like team members of development teams and basically everybody were sprinting? Or would you just see more tighter collaboration between the development team or team in Scrum and those people being stakeholders or subject matter experts joining at refinement meetings and whatnot? Like what was the team, and when you say they joined the team, what actually do you mean by that?
So as I said at the beginning, there was IT development teams.
Right.
95% of them were programmers in the Salesforce, and they were implementing specifications filed under the user story issue type in Jira, but they were really specifications without any contact with the users, without any context of the broad thing, just what the business analyst brought to them. And it was a very, very smart guy. It's a guy who worked in this company for 18 years, so he knew everything. It was a tremendous source of knowledge. And when they threw in these people, the management didn't have a notion of team responsibility, but they wanted 100% ownership of this. They call it squad because it is still a cool name. And when we integrated them, we made sure that they feel, or we were trying to make sure that we feel as a single team responsible for a single thing. This is when the product definition comes from. It frames the area of responsibility. We had a single product backlog. We were again lucky. We had it on the wall, not in the Jira, actually, because the product owner were pure luck. It actually was because the product owner were filing the requirements in the Excel sheet.
Okay.
So again,
anything is better than that. So he didn't insist on the Jira.
Lucky guys checklist.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Which luck which luck you need to produce to be able to do Scrum properly.
This is not a big enough sheet of paper.
I have more paper.
Okay.
And actually having the backlog on the wall visible for everyone and making the team responsible for managing it helped a lot. And at the beginning, the refinement sessions and the planning sessions were just disasters. The product owner was standing at the wall and reading every single sticky at a time. There was 20 people sitting around the chairs and like, okay, then another boring meeting. So then we started to employ some techniques how to pull them in a few months. The team planned himself and even did the refinement. And when the product owner was missing, there was no major problem because they learned to know to which people they should go for which problem areas and everything.
Okay.
But what was really the key was reminding all the time and making sure all the time, this is the team responsibility. You are responsible for all of it as a team. You need to come to a decision. You need to come to an agreement. You need to agree with anything. So at the beginning, there was this IT team in a room, in a large room, I don't know, 15 times 6 meters. And all of them were sitting in a corner in a table like this. Yeah, they couldn't fit, and the other tables were empty. And then the business people came to a different room, which was right behind the door in a larger open space, and they were like two separate teams. Yeah, some of them even were afraid to go behind the door. And then after they came up with the idea, let's mix up. They started to collaborate with each other much more, and. Then I saw this effect. Whoever was on the Craig Larman's training, he shares this research on the amount of collaboration dependent of the physical distance between people in a team, sometimes from the 17s. And it goes like this. The level of collaboration and it start declining very steeply down to close to 0, and this breaking point is at 2 meters.
Yeah.
And when I talk to people in my training, they don't believe me. But I said, behind the door on a different continent doesn't make much of a difference in terms of collaboration. And I saw this with this team. It really showed. So when they mixed up, there were 2 teams in this room and a third one behind the door, like 5 meters away. And the level of collaboration between these 2 were totally different than between this one. And they shared the product owner, shared the product, shared the backlog, shared the responsibility. They just had a door in between them, which was constantly open.
Yeah, looks like we have a bad news for the guys who love online, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how this all will be affected by everybody we're working remotely and via Zoom. And do you see, like, you guys jumping to the present days? How is the current situation with COVID-19 is affecting the collaboration and communication and cooperation patterns that you see there?
I would point out maybe 2 things. First, I will get back a little bit to the paper physical wall that was used as a backlog, because obviously you cannot use that working remotely, and the team adopted Azure DevOps as a main tool for backlog and stuff. And what the team themselves said that they're very lucky to have worked with the physical backlog before they jumped into the digital one, because the habits and then the working agreements they have in place using the physical one makes them use the digital one more effectively and let's say more responsibly. And that's the one point. And the second point, obviously, the remote work makes things more difficult. But again, as I have the experience with working with very, very new teams and also with the major teams, I see that the team is handling, or these teams are handling the situation pretty well. And again, my opinion is that it's because they already have these habits and working agreements in place that they've adjusted to remote work, but the essentials are already there.
Yeah,
and
makes
even
sense.
Though the situation is more complicated, we've seen like almost no decrease in productivity in the past weeks.
Okay, this is completely aligned with my experience and my observation, because some companies are see no big difference. They even see increase in performance and productivity because people can be a bit more focused at times at home than in the office. But other teams report like completely disastrous situation with people working remotely. I guess this all boils down to whether you have a good, I would not call it culture, because culture doesn't mean much, but habits, right? Do you have good habits of collaboration? And if you know how to collaborate physically, moving this to Zoom and Miro will not change much. Well, you wouldn't be able to smell people, right, with the current level of technologies, but that's probably about it. You won't be able to touch and rip apart one Post-it together, but that's about it, right? You'll be able to move stuff around and be able to have the same rich collaboration as you would have standing across one physical board.
I would even Alexei connect it with the responsibility, because the team really the notion of collective responsibility in the team is very high, I believe. I strongly believe. And in that sense, the team, when the whole Corona thing started, and the team was sent home, the approach for the team of the team was like, okay, we have this situation, but it doesn't change a thing. We're still responsible for the whole thing, and let's find a way, and let's find a solution how to cope with this as best as we can. Right. And they spent like really like maybe two to three sprints really finding the right tools, finding the right approaches. Again, iteratively and sprint after sprint, we evaluated tools and stuff. And again, I strongly believe that this is also connected with the sense of responsibility that was already in place in the team.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Speaking of team responsibility, which is our main topic here, you guys, I hear you guys using two different words describing similar stuff. I just understand you are using word ownership or shared ownership, and you use the word responsibility. Are these synonyms, or one is derived from the other? Are we speaking here about teams feeling the ownership of the product, and responsible behavior, it's more individual behavior that comes from feeling that ownership? Or like, how would you connect these topics? It's a bit philosophical, but I really would like to understand for myself, because I believe lots of people speak of responsibility, and every manager, like, everybody knows the word responsibility, and people need to be responsible, and you are not responsible, stuff like that, you're not committed. But the word ownership of the product, this is not something that is used a lot, except for product owner needs to own the product, right? But now we're speaking about the team owning the product. Like, what's your take on this? So ownership, responsibility, what's the connection? What's what?
I don't think I have a good definitions of each. And I think the ownership comes after taking responsibility with some delay. The responsibility is okay, so I will do my best to help this. Doesn't necessarily mean I believe it or I own it or I want it to do the best, but I take the responsibility. And after some time, the ownership grows on the people, because they see that their responsibility actually bears some effect, some meaningfulness.
Okay, I see it a bit. I see it a bit differently, though. I think there's a saying in LeSS. Yeah, you should not rent your process. You should own your process, right? That's what Craig Alarman, I believe, used to say, which means that if you like, and like, how often do you wash a rental car, or how often do you wash your own car? So if you own something, or if you feel you own something, right, you would show some behaviors that are likely to be seen by people observing you as responsible behaviors. But the more you do these responsible behaviors, the more you wash your cars, or the more you take care of something, the more ownership about this thing you feel. So this creates this vicious cycle where the more you work on something, the more ownership you feel. So I believe responsibility is an action towards increasing the level of ownership, something like that. But you need to start somewhere.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe that's a bit too philosophical. It's chicken and egg. But I believe what you've created in the beginning, when you, or your CFO rather, right? He said, like, I want these people together to own the product. That created this context in which people who wanted to do that, right, could have then started to expose or exercise some activities which were responsible, and in the end they would see the results, and then the ownership would grow. So when you guys propose this topic, team responsibility, what actually you wanted to share with us? Are there some stories? Are there some techniques, or there some practices? They would be my question.
I actually have a very nice, like, probably flow of the conversation. Like, guys, we decided to speak about the team responsibility, right? The responsibility sounds like a corporate values, like, let's be open, let's be responsible, let's take the ownership. Fairly saying, it sounds like a bullshit, right? Because it's not represented with some behavior. So I'm interested in actually, what do you mean in the team responsibility? How this responsibility is visualized in some stories. Tell us the stories of team responsibility. Like, when we do this what we mean under team responsibility. Our teams do this part. Our teams make refinement with business in and owning the product. And this part we can explain in this behavior. Like, let's be more precise about the responsibility in examples of actual responsibility.
It's a very nice question. I feel it the same way. The team responsibility is being mentioned oftentimes in the framework and conferences and everything, without any specific things what it actually means. And I don't have any recipe other than hard work and being there and constantly reminding everyone, not on the concept, but situationally. At specific situation, what does it mean that the team is responsible for deciding this or making this happen on anything? And it is like raising a kid. It takes time. It takes a development. You need to have patience. You need to have infinite patience.
That's correct. Yes.
So let's give a few examples. Maybe from the easiest ones. So you have a planning session, and the people are doing Scrum for a few weeks, so they still work in the old habits, the old mental model on the view where they were being given tasks individually by someone. They were checked upon by someone. Someone accepted the result of the task, and their area of responsibility was more in the execution than deciding if it's actually helpful or not. Now you have a planning session, and you start with a goal, and you need to remind everyone. So, what do we want to achieve collectively? What do we want to learn? What do we want to bring? What was the goal? And what actions can we take? What backlog items do actually contribute to this goal? And when you ask this question, there is a minute silence. There are 2 minutes silence, and suddenly a manager came. So let's do it this way. And you need to stop it. No, this is the team responsibility. They need to come up with the plan, come up with the steps taken. They need to agree on it. And at the beginning, it takes time because people are not comfortable. People are not used to this, and you need to give them the support and the patience, and make sure that the impatient managers will come to the easier solution. You do it. You tell him. You bring that. Are not there. Yeah. And after some time, someone steps up and starts to take leadership, individual responsibility, but for the whole team thinks. And there is nothing like magical about it. It's like really about patience and about persistence and about consistency. Anytime you make a shortcut, so you do this, or why not do it this way? Suddenly you are taking the responsibility away from the people. Yeah. Let's go a bit further in the story. One of the things that this team was suffering from was some not ideal choice of technology, which was on the leadership level, and the technology proved to be not very mature at the time for what they were building, and not really ideal. And before we started with Scrum and with the small LeSS, there were a few activities from the actual developers or architects to come up with a different technology, but there was some politics involved, so they were silenced. And once this business people came and we started doing a proper Scrum, this team was really held back by the technology a lot. Yeah, the product actually sucked. It was like 30 seconds delays between refreshes on two screens. It was like unbearable. And the technology was it's not ideal use, and not ideal architecture was behind that. And we held an offsite, I don't know, at the beginning of March, so really a few weeks into the team's existence. And during the offsite, we were coming up collectively with a roadmap. So the whole intelligence of the team was brought to come up with what is actually necessary to do, and if we can actually roll out before long, so it actually can generate some sales and come to the market not too late. And after the first day, which was really exhausting, and many people were contributing to the roadmap with their views, one of the guy after the offsite came to a conclusion, showed on a beamer the solution in the new technology which he was secretly implementing in his free time. And it looked wonderful, and it was much faster. It was kind of a prototype, but still. And the broker managers, the business people who were actually in the contact with the actual brokers, came to that and said, "We have this. Why no one showed us? We have this, and we are working on this." And it was a very heated discussion, very emotional, but they came up, so what can we do about it? What can we do about it? They just discussed the whole political thing, all the situation, all the technology and everything behind it, and they decided, let's make sure that we can use this technology. And it wasn't like easy discussion. It took a month with the leadership and management, and it was really a very difficult situation. But this is probably the situation when the team gelled a lot against a common enemy, and objectively pushed to use a different technology, basically rewrite a lot of things in this new technology, and probably without it they wouldn't succeed in the whole endeavor. Yeah. And this was another example of the team responsibility. No one told them, it was their decision, and they needed to come up with the way how to actually communicate it, how to put it, so not to embarrass anyone, and do it in a clean corporate way, yet save the project. And this is when the actual ownership grew on the people.
Thank you for.
I had a very similar. I had a very similar story when I worked at Xing, where basically there was some technology. Basically, the management overruled at some point the development team and made them basically use some technology, right? Which in the end didn't work out to be a good choice from the technological point of view. And actually, but that enemy, the technology that somebody wanted you to use but you are against, that actually created a very nice movement within the team, that the team was fighting for a year and a half, trying to pilot without actually for permission, pilot and experiment with some new technology to show that actually the idea can be a bit better. So actually, sometimes I feel without this enemy that is introduced, people would not step in and take ownership. So maybe actually management needs to, at some point, overrule the teams, so that then the coach or whoever can help the team to understand, okay, that's wrong. You guys need to come up with your own way.
Yeah.
Because if you always live in a freedom environment and a free environment, you don't really know what freedom is. So it needs to be taken away, so that you actually go and you fight for it. So sometimes I believe this lack of empowerment or lack of ownership sometimes creates a very positive behaviors that in the end can take people actually take much more responsibility than they would otherwise. Yeah. So let's.
We Eastern Europeans know something about it, right?
Well, yeah,
we all do, right?
Some of us.
And the Western Europe doesn't know. They don't know.
No. So let's continue with the stories like that. Could you guys give some more examples of team responsibility? Or, you know what, you probably have some more teams, right, who are now following your approaches at the company. Is it? Do they look at these teams and try to copy? Is implementing Scrum by copying others' work? If yes, how? If not, why? My feeling is that the initial teams who get some cool challenge and they really overcome it and they really take ownership and then behave responsibly, they really understood something. The other people who just look at these guys who move nice, colorful post-its on the wall, those guys, the second wave, so to say, they didn't have this initial insight. They just copy and paste the similar ceremonies. So they might not even have this depth understanding or individual experience of that ownership. Like, do you see that? How does that movement scales, if it scales inside an N?
Let me start, and Karel will probably join me at some point. I would elaborate a bit again. Not only we did not tell anybody we are using LeSS, but for the rest of the company, we did not even tell them we were using Scrum. And when I was being hired back at the beginning of 2019, I had this interview with the CEO where he just said, okay, there's this way of working of this team It was originally called Stella team. And I would like to have this way of working somehow, scaled into the rest of the company. There was no mentioning of Scrum, no mentioning of LeSS, and so that was just the way of working. And what we're trying is somehow scale this way of working to the rest of the company. And now probably should make a spoiler alert for people often and watching. But we're not going about LeSS. We're not going about just organically implement bits and pieces here and there and see the company moving slowly towards adopting some of the aspects of Scrum or LeSS. Yeah, but there are actually like what is 4, 5, 6 team now, Karel, that are like using Scrum by naming it Scrum, which is the original Stella team plus TS Code, and now the 2 teams in data. Yeah, but those are like the only teams that are using Scrum with the knowledge of being Scrum.
Yeah. I think it in Stella it's still 4 teams, right?
Yes, it's 4 teams.
Yeah. So yes, there was a discussion on the board level after Stella was successfully delivered in September 2018, and the way of working started to have fruits and was visible not only in the results of the development, but on the development of the people and their engagement and everything. So there was a discussion how to proceed. And at the time, there started this McKinsey-ish, Spotify-ish movement all around. So of course there is an inversion of this as well, and we got this slide deck. By the way, in the other branches, we are rolling out this. Do you want any help? It was a classic squad drive, everything. And the CEO said, no, not yet. We are not ready. We have the Stella team, and we want to see what can we do next. And in the meantime, they acquired Aegon, the other insurance, only on Czech and Slovak market, not worldwide. And they came a different way of working. They were much smaller. They were like, kind of like a family business. Yeah? People talking to each other all the time, having kind of monthly sprint, but not really following Scrum. So they had a discussion. So we have the Stella way, we have the Aegon way, and we have the old and then traditional way. So what do we do? And they luckily decided not to force anything upon anyone. However, they wanted to replicate parts or the good parts of the Stella into other teams. So I'm currently since the January helping with other product group, which is a bit smaller. It's now below 15 people, but it goes up and down with the situation. And we start with Scrum as well, on a little smaller scale. But that's why our talk on the conference is called Framework-less Agile Adoption. There is no really force framework to anyone.
So I have this question to clarify or rather open. Like, it's not, you guys are not the first people who I meet. We actually had Gene Gendel during our previous podcast. He also mentioned like something very similar. He says, well, I'm working in this company. Nobody knows that we're using something that some people refer as LeSS. We even don't mention Agile and Scrum. We just work in this way. And this is how LeSS adoptions should be. Because once you attach a label, people might have different ideas or stuff like that. So what is the benefit of going stealth? That is one part of my question. Why not say we're doing LeSS with a flag with a LeSS banner on top and go full fledged? What's the danger here?
I think that people would start seeing it as a method, as a framework. It has needs, it has structure. It must have pros and cons, right? And then there is a whole menu of the methods, and let's see about the pros and cons as well. So this is what I see as one of the danger. Actually, it showed when we were hiring an internal coach before we found Martin. There was another one, and he came from the safe environment, the Skeletal Agile framework, a lot of experience, and he suddenly opened up this topic. So guys, what I'm seeing, you are doing less, but there are other things as well. And he started to come around people talking about frameworks, and it started to come up with a very weird discussion that were really about nothing, but about the structure and pros and cons. And it took us a while to keep it down and go back to the roots of the team responsibility, of the adaptiveness. And
so what I hear is that what you guys are saying is that when people are naming stuff, usually like naming stuff should create some clarity, right? So this is beer, this is wine. Do not drink beer after wine, but rather in a different manner. No, the names help people to avoid confusion. But what I hear here is that actually naming methods and frameworks actually create more confusion, because then people start to compare things and names without really talking about the essence, but just looking at the pictures of these things. Is it how you guys experience that?
I would say so. I might probably rephrase it a bit. From my perspective, Scrum or even LeSS are means to an end.
Yep.
They're tools that the team can implement in order to achieve something. And what we want to achieve in the teams is exactly responsibility, ownership, and drive and pride in creating a good product. Once you label the stuff, it might take the focus from the work and from the, as you mentioned, essence, and from things that you want to achieve, to the framework itself. And then you start to exactly compare bits and pieces and safe and LeSS and stuff like this, and you start to focus on the framework more than on what you actually want to achieve by using that framework or approach. So from my point of view, the responsibility, the ownership, the product pride, these are the important things. And the methods and the approaches that you use to achieve those you don't have to label them. Yeah.
Have you ever discussed this? Have you ever discussed that responsibility and ownership as the goals you want to achieve in the teams? I wonder, as more formally than now.
Yes. I think so. It comes up much more often in discussions with the management, with the board, with the product owner, with the actual people, than the frameworks. Maybe I would rephrase one more. The framework looks like a solution, something that you buy, unbox, implement, and it's there. But the frameworks, at least the Scrum and LeSS, are not really solutions, but tools for coming up with your solution.
Thinking tools. Right? Yeah,
I believe it also brings some bias people have for some tools. Like if we speak about Scrum, we tried Scrum, blah blah blah. That's not gonna work in our domain, in our company. We tried it 2 years, 5 years ago. There was a very bad feedback about this. Like, you don't know what's actually people tried there. You have no idea what was the context, right? But it brings some complexity, I believe, also in the level of understanding, different understanding of the same tools.
Okay, so you believe it's good not to mention, not to bring any frameworks. I have the second part of the question. I understand why would you not bring it in the beginning, because otherwise people would be confused and we will be focusing on the names, on the pictures instead of the essence. But if you want to preserve that, do you think you should have a name? Because like what I actually heard Craig Alarman said during his CLP class that I was a part of. He said, well, usually a typical cycle of LeSS is about 4 years, and in 4 years, LeSS adoption would die. Guess why? He's asking, and basically the answer is, well, because that's a typical cycle. CTOs are hired in the company. So after this CTO or support will go, well, a new one come, and because the new one comes, typically the new CTO wants to do things differently or to show off and stuff, and then of course he would rewrite the transformation, right? So I wonder if not naming things here is helping to preserve that, or it is actually not. So from your experience.
I haven't been with a company more than 4 years.
Lucky again.
Lucky again. So.
If Aaron keeps me for 2 years, I will tell you. But it definitely will have something to do with the CTO cycle, because to be perfectly clear, where we came in NN was driven a lot or supported a lot by the CEO. In the beginning, he is attending every single sprint review, and the first year we were doing weekly sprints, and whenever he was in the building, he cleared his agenda and he was at the sprint review. He even attended a few retrospectives, especially at the beginning when we were solving things outside of the team and the structure, and he was attending and he was being helpful. He came Tuesday to the team, guys, do you need any help? Do you need any support? And he was trying to provide coaching to the team instead of micromanaging. So this and his belief in the 100% dedication, 100% focus, and 100% responsibility is a strong factor in how far we came. And I don't know if he sometimes leaves and someone else comes, it might again decline or not. Hard to say. Yeah, but.
I mean,
okay. Yeah. Martin,
venture a guess. Getting back to the question of labeling it or not, and again, it's a guess. I think that by not labeling it, it might actually prove more durable in the event of CTO CEO changing. Because it's then the way of working. It's the way of working that is owned by the teams. It is not labeled. And it might be more durable and more prone to the changes in the management than if it's labeled. But as Karel said, I have no experience with changing management, so that remains to be seen if I ever experience such a situation. But that would be my guess.
Okay, cool. So we'll be wrapping up. And well, some people are watching us, and those people I bet the ones who prefer listening to LeSS podcast more than going out and have some beer or at least spend some evening with the families. So I believe they're looking for some inspiration, answers, motivation, and whatnot. So what do you think? What would you maybe like final recommendations or list of advices you can give to people who are about to start their journey? For example, they really like LeSS. That's why they're on this podcast, right? What would be your key advices you would give them so to help them actually implement that in their environment? Like maybe like 5 key things they should keep in mind to make sure. Well, luck, they should need some luck as we discussed, but sure. Apart of luck, what they should be looking at, what should be thinking of, which maybe environments you don't recommend them to go into to start, which environments are suitable. If you have ideas, what would be the right and wrong periods of starting to actually start to change the way people work, right? And like any advices, I guess, go here. Let's just brainstorm some useful stuff for our friends who are watching us together. I think Karel has something on his mind.
Yeah, I was always in commercial environments, in private companies, large or small, but never in the government and such. So I don't know if it is any different or not. I think it is. However, if you are in the commercial sphere, I don't think there is environment worse and bad per se, but it's about the leadership, if they actually believe in self-management or not, or if you can help them believe in it. They provide enough support for a long period of time to see it grow. And the self-management, especially in LeSS, is a very, very strong part of the success. Yeah.
How would you start with self-management, right? It sounds like a nice concept. How would you push away management so the team has at least any chance to self-organize? How would you start with that?
It will sound cheap, but read Richard Heckman's work to understand
leading teams, right?
Leading teams, yes, leading teams to properly understand what it actually is and how it isn't really dependent on if it's IT or non-IT, but what are the core, very well researched conditions that need to be in place. Yeah, and this is one of the recommended literature, and the whole LeSS framework takes a lot from Richard Heckman's work. I think this will be the first step. It sounds cheap, but read it and understand properly how self-management works, and then the actual steps in your environment would be more clear. And I would restrain from any book that have an agile leadership on its on its title. There might be some good of them, but I think it would be a rare exception. I more recommend going to this work, which is very, very well researched and is actually outside of the whole software, IT, and an agile literature. Yeah, these are the very foundations.
I would, and this might be again a bit general, but in order to achieve self-management in the teams, I believe there needs to be conditions in the organization to do that, which is building a bit on what Karel is recommending for a reading. And I would first check the organization itself and try to assess whether the surrounding organization actually is positioned to create such conditions for self-managed teams, and I would start there. Yeah, just to clarify, speaking from personal experience, when I was joining NM, I spent like a week there, just observing stuff, and I had discussions with Karel, with Petr Kopřiva, who will be joining us for the conference, also with CEO, and I believe that those factors that I've seen coming from CEO through Petr to Karel actually were the factors, the positive factors in my decision to join NM, because I've seen that there actually is possibility to create self-managed and self-organized teams within the organization.
Mm-hmm. And what would be the first criteria that you actually will be able to see that, okay, we are on the right path, self-organization starts to get organized? What will be the first things that you should be looking for?
Personally, for me, it was the discussion with the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing his story and hearing his proclamation about his not willingness but his desire to empower the teams in terms of ownership and in terms of end-to-end responsibility for the product they're making.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
All right. It sounds like we are logically reaching the end of the discussion. I think we dug quite deep into what responsibility and ownership means. Thank you guys for the story you shared with us. To me, it was really inspiring. I really would like to hear these kind of stories more often. Right. It also, again, proves the point that we should have less adoptions, right? We should just have people feeling more ownership and more proud of what they do, and everything else is just the side effect of that. So frameworkless agile adoptions is probably what's gonna stay with me after this podcast. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for having us here.
Everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to the coffee.